Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Lynn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Thank you for joining us on Ethical Perspectives. Our topic is digital civility. As human beings, we can agree that we share more in common that we have more commonalities than we do differences. For example, most of us value autonomy and privacy and self-determination. But what happens if we lose any claim to those properties? With the onset of the cyber culture, the cyber industry, it seems as though our beliefs, our demographics, our personal information, our data points, our descriptors, they're all readily available to entities that we cannot control, whether those entities be insurers or marketers or data brokers or browser spies or financial institutions or governments or employers. So here to help us find some resolution and to help us promote a sense of digital civility is our distinguished panel from the Electronic Frontier Foundation in San Francisco. And they've been working at this for over 30 years. And so I just invite the panel to introduce themselves, say a little bit about what they do and the mission of EFF.
Right, I could start us off. I'm Rory Meir from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. We're a nonprofit founded in the 1990s and have since then been fighting for civil liberties in the digital world through three kind of methods. One is through technology and innovation. One is through our activism, and one is through our impact litigation and policy. So I'm from the activism team. I'm the grassroots advocacy organizer with the EFF, and I'm lucky enough to be a part of a community network nationwide called the Electronic Frontier Alliance. So it's over 80 local groups advocating for digital freedoms locally across the country, centered around free expression, security, privacy, creativity, and access to knowledge. So I'm really excited to be with you here today.
I can go next. My name is Daly Barnett. I'm a staff technologist at the EFF. I am on the tech projects team. So we work to develop different technology projects for consumers, other technologists, and anyone that uses tools online. And I work specifically on the Privacy Badger browser extension, which we can go into a little bit more detail into later.
All right, well, thanks. And my name is Kurt Opsahl. I am the Deputy Executive Director and General Counsel with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. So I've been with EFF for about 15 years now, working on both on the legal side and on the administrative side, trying to help shape the law to make a brighter future. And as Rory gave an excellent introduction, I guess I'll just echo that a little bit. So we try and make changes to the law through impact litigation, trying to defend and enforce our constitutional rights. We also pay attention to legislation, working with our legislative team and the activism to get people to provide grassroots support for changes to the law, to help modernize them for today's era. We're trying to make it so that we have a brighter future, one in which our rights are preserved, our fundamental freedoms are intact, that we're not losing out on important civil liberties as we move into a digital era, and can preserve and protect the privacy, autonomy, and freedom of expression that we've come to cherish.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's a good segue. And maybe you could speak a little bit more about some of the significant cases that you have been involved in recently, or that you have on tap right now. Some of the things, perhaps the FOSTA program, or any of the issues that you'd like to.
I mean, there are many issues that we've been working on. Myself, I've done a lot of work on the privacy side, especially privacy vis-a-vis the government. So a case that I've been working on for a number of years has been, we have a suit challenging the NSA warrantless surveillance program, trying to enforce our Fourth Amendment rights against warrantless wiretapping of your internet communications. This is the program that you may have read about in the news. It was a big thing a while back. Edward Snowden brought a number of aspects of it to light, where there was a massive program of surveillance conducted by the NSA, including on US citizens and people around the world. So we've been challenging that. The case is now many, many years old, but it still is continuing. We've also been involved in a number of more recent cases. I've not personally been involved in it, but EFF has, with our case challenging the FOSTA litigation, or legislation, I should say. That is the SESTA FOSTA, which are a set of laws that are attempting to push back on online trafficking, but it is pretty broad law, overscoping and leading to widespread internet censorship, and websites, other online services have either prohibited users from speaking or shut down entirely. So it creates some new federal crimes about with some undefined terms that meant that organizations doing educational, health, and safety related works online, trying to make the world a better place in a very difficult and challenging area, are fear of their ability to exercise their First Amendment rights. It also has limited a very important federal immunity for online intermediaries, Section 230. You may have heard a lot about this today. That immunity is allowed for the online services that we know today: Craigslist, Reddit, YouTube, Facebook, all of those. And helps ensure the internet supports diverse and divergent viewpoints, robust debate. And the website owners don't need to be worried about being sued for their users' speech. But the removal of Section 230 protections created by FOSTA has resulted in these intermediaries shutting down entire sections or discussion boards for fear of being subject to criminal prosecution. So we have been challenging that on behalf of some organizations who are being afraid of exercising their rights. And that case is ongoing.
Yeah, your website is so complex. I see also that you're weighing in on the Google, Facebook monopolization issue, correct?
Yeah, we've been weighing in on basically online competition, and we're in favor of more competition. And this is a difficult thing to do. There's a lot of set in values for people to be in a system. It makes it difficult for them to leave. They want to be in the system where their friends are on. So that makes it a bit of a challenge to have real competition. And one of the things that we'd like to see more competition on is privacy. I'm sure everyone watching this is well aware of many privacy criticisms leveled against Google and Facebook and other online companies. And if we don't have a competitive marketplace for privacy, it's hard to ensure that you have privacy, and it makes it hard for you to say, oh, well, you know what, I don't like their privacy practices. I'm going to get this service from somebody else.
Great site to look at, EFF.org. Let's talk a little bit about resources and tools. I heard you mention Privacy Badger, and that's one of my favorites because, these concepts can seem very techy for many of us. And so it's important for the listening audience to understand that EFF makes every effort to make tools and resources digestible. And so I've used the Privacy Badger, and you know much more, so go right ahead and tell us about it.
Sure, yeah. So Privacy Badger is a browser extension that is free and open source. A browser extension is a piece of software that you get to install on your browser, and it will modify how your browser behaves and looks online as you browse. And Privacy Badger is especially made to be a third-party tracker blocker. It's a privacy extension, right? It's install and forget, as we like to think of it. So it is very user-friendly. You don't have to have any sort of high standard of technical expertise to use it. You can just install it and forget that it's there and know that it's working to protect your privacy. It blocks third-party trackers, which are pieces of embedded code that are usually secret and hidden on web pages that fingerprint you or run sort of creepy analytics scripts to identify who you are, what you're doing on a web page, where else you've been on other web pages, and what you were doing there. And then they gather all that up and sell it to whoever wants to buy it. It's a pretty nasty industry, and we want to stop it, or we want to give users the ability to opt out of that by default, and that's what Privacy Badger does. We do a few other projects as well. There's a HTTPS Everywhere, which is a similar tool, and it is a browser extension, but it's a little more security focused in that it defaults to encrypting your traffic on the web. That's the briefest answer I can give on it. We also work on Certbot and Panopticlick, and there's a few other things in the works out there.
Yeah, and I can echo your words about the ease of using Privacy Badger. That little guy just goes and goes, and I look sometimes and there's like 40 people tracking me. Yeah. And the other thing is it learns, right? I mean, it doesn't, it looks for malicious trackers, and it learns how to, it doesn't just knock out everything that's tracking you.
Right, so a lot of tracker blocking extensions work off of just these like person curated lists, where Privacy Badger is a bit special in that it is trained to recognize behavior that's bad. And then it will attribute that behavior to whichever sort of resource it's coming from. And then it knows to block those things based on what they're doing. Rather than saying like, oh, I know Google Analytics is an advertising arm of the advertising company Google, and we should block that. It learns to recognize like the kind of creepy things that are happening behind the scenes, and then it blocks them from doing those things to you.
So let's dig in a little bit more and to, you know, just continuing that line of thought. What's in it for us? That is, how is EFF and EFA relevant to us everyday people who just jump on and use browsers? In addition to Privacy Badger, how do we learn more about protecting ourselves? How do we learn more about how to manage online behavior?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question because often talking about these issues, it can feel like it's a decision done by some company in San Francisco or some policymaker in DC. But really, technology is a part of all of our lives and part of all the groups we're part of. Your business or your church, like everyone is using their phones and the internet to organize. So these issues really permeate throughout our lives. And I think that's why I'm lucky enough to be working on the Electronic Frontier Alliance, where people are recognizing that on more local levels, it could be at a university locally, it could be just the people in your household, that it's important to come together and kind of work on improving each other's situation. My background in particular is as a community educator. I was a part of a group that would just hold monthly workshops in the library talking about the kind of basics of here's how to install things like Privacy Badger, here's how to stay safe, but also here's how to talk about these issues with your family members or your coworkers so you can be more protected. And in addition to the workshops, the Electronic Frontier Alliance does a lot of local advocacy. So there are issues like FOSTA that affect everyone, they're federal issues. But even, like I said before, local issues, if you're a student, your university's policies may affect you. Or in Iowa, the state level issues will impact you as well. So finding ways to run effective campaigns and just educate people on these issues. A lot of the time, these are very technical issues that folks need help understanding before they can make good policies on those other levels.
Yeah, thanks. And Roy, since you're on that, can you talk a little bit more about students? I mean, we actually have a couple questions coming up later, but protecting students' privacy, especially since so many kids are online now, it's just a whole new ballgame.
Yeah, no, and this is something I really care about. I have a background as an educator, and kind of looking at every level of the issue of a university or school's decision to use a certain software or to have a certain attendance policy or testing policy can greatly affect the rights of the students involved. For example, proctoring software, software that is used to help students take tests, can often be very invasive. There are cases where you have to have your webcam on, and they have to do like a room scan before you can even take a test, which, shouldn't be part of your education evaluation. But then on other levels, I also care a lot about recent location tracking apps becoming mandatory at some universities in light of the pandemic. So making sure that if someone's going to require, well, first of all, making sure that it's not required that you offer that sensitive information. But if that information, if you do opt into it, making sure there are clear regulations and that you're being protected in that system. So I've been working a lot with student groups to kind of talk about those campus level issues, which, they're often not laws, they're often up to some decision maker, and just finding out, all right, how do we convince this decision maker to do what's right for the students' digital rights?
So, yeah, flesh that out a little bit. And if we wanted to do something locally, if we had students who were interested in finding out more about EFF or just any spectrum, any part of the population who was interested in finding out more about options, what would a local EFA affiliate look like? What steps would we take? How would we?
Definitely. I'll offer 4 first steps for you to choose from.
I'm going to write them down.
If you go to eff.org/deeplinks, you can see all these great blog posts that folks at the organization have been writing. And these are issues from federal to local, talking about thinking about how to think about these digital right issues. 2 other websites that are really useful, particularly if you're interested in teaching yourself or teaching others, are the Surveillance Self-Defense or Security Education Companion, ssd.eff.org or sec.eff.org, are really great educational resources that you can get started right away improving your own security or the security of others with pre-made lesson plans. And then the last one I'll say is reach out. If you are a part of a local group that wants to advocate for these issues, email organizing@eff.org, and you'll be contacting me and the team I'm a part of. And we can talk about ways to connect you with other groups doing similar work, or potentially joining the EFA if your group is aligned with our principles.
It sounds great. Let's transition now because, prior to this broadcast, I reached out to some people and asked what kind of questions they may have. Bernard says, and some of this we may have covered, but these were more complex questions, so maybe we can go into them a little deeper. Bernard said, can the current Constitution cover the digital age? If not, can some solid legislation be put together so it's not a constant arms race between the government and citizens trying to stay ahead of surveillance? Going back a little, how does that relate to the constitutional protectives for personal papers? It seems inadequate in this digital age.
Well, I guess let me address that. I think, these are all one of the big challenges is how to understand and interpret our constitutional rights to the digital age. But there's been actually some pretty good progress on that front. A couple of years back, there was a case, Riley versus California, and this concerned a search incident to arrest. And of course, these days you carry around a smartphone in your pocket. And the police said, well, therefore, we have a longstanding doctrine that you can look in someone's pockets when you arrest them. You want to see if there's, if they got a switchblade in there or something like that. And that search incident to arrest was something that didn't require a warrant. And they said, so therefore, if you have a phone in your pocket, we can search the phone. We should have the right to look at everything that's on your phone because it's just like anything else in your pocket. And that went up to the Supreme Court, and they said no, that they recognize that what's on your smartphone is a far more intimate detail about your life. It is, the apps on there will tell things about your health, your political leanings, what you do in your spare time, your calendar, a record of where you've been. It is basically a way to get a complete dossier about you when you have that in your pocket. In order to make effective the protections put into the Constitution, even back in the 1700s, we have to modernize our understanding of that, and that when it talks about in the Constitution, protection for your papers, that it is talking about the same thing that we have on the smartphone. And so they have to get a warrant to get onto your phone. And there have been a couple other cases, like there was one also fairly recently dealing with tracking your location through cell towers. And in that case, law enforcement was saying, well, it was always the case that we could follow somebody, drive down the street behind them. And so therefore, with new technologies, we can modernize this and just have the cell tower information, see what cell towers your phone connects to, which also gives you a location and where you're walking down the street, save a whole bunch of money, and we have the same effect. So it's no different from following someone down the street. And the Supreme Court again said, no, that is different. Like that, this is a record of where everybody has been. People who have no suspicion about ordinary civilians. We all know where they have been. These records are kept for 6 months, and so it's like a time machine. You could just go back in time and follow them, even though you had no reason to follow them at that time. And so, these are just a couple of cases where courts are grappling with this, and it is an important question. And I think what we need is really just to make sure that this trend continues, that we are looking at what is the society that we want to have. And the level of privacy, and you want to have a society where you have a consistent level of privacy and autonomy, so that every technological development doesn't throw that privacy out the window, but we sort of continue to maintain it while taking advantage of the time. So you can have a smartphone in your pocket without surrendering the rights to the Fourth Amendment for all your personal details. That you can walk down the street connecting to the internet, connecting to smartphones, and not surrender the privacy that you had walking down the street. So these are all important, and I think we got to do it, and we are doing it.
Great. So are we talking about local legislation or federal legislation? I mean, where do you get the ball rolling here?
I think to be clear, I think for a lot of these things, it is just interpretations of the Constitution. We don't have to change the Constitution. However, there could be plenty of areas where we will need local legislation, we'll need state legislation and federal legislation to help clarify these things. So, there's a number of statutes that they're old. The Electronic Communications Privacy Act was passed in 1986. When the concept of email was barely known by anyone outside of the military and some universities. Now everybody has it. And there have been efforts to modernize it. So in California, where EFF is based, there is a Electronic Communications Privacy Act that was passed by the legislature, and that would be a great thing for a lot of states to adopt as something to protect their citizens and modernize the law. And I think this is something maybe Rory can expand on, but we've also worked with a number of EFA groups to help pass local legislation to modernize some of the city practices, worked on facial recognition, and also for community control of police surveillance technologies. Rory,
thank you. Well, we're kind of running short on time. I'm gonna squish two questions here together that are kind of similar. Quinn says, more of a comment than a question, how are schools factoring in new practices or guidelines for cyberbullying as more schools are going to remote and a virtual platform? And Brianna is a local educator. She says, as an educator teaching in 2020, I'm trying to emphasize the idea of a digital footprint and being aware of online safety to my students. What do you recommend as resources or tips to help students understand their digital privacy?
Those are great questions. I'm happy to start off, and I think Daly might have some interesting things about harm reduction, because I think that's ultimately what both of these questions are about. We talk about issues like privacy and security, and they tend to be like big, abstract, squishy ideas. But then there's kind of a real world, concrete, people can be harmed if, for example, earlier this year when teachers were pivoting to remote learning, they were relying on Zoom, and there was an issue where people could randomly enter in Zoom room numbers and crash them. And there was a phenomenon of people posting objectionable, upsetting material to different classrooms. so that's like one example of like a vulnerability and security isn't just some abstract, someone might steal an old recipe I don't care about, but actually is a concrete thing that can cause harm. So I think talking about those issues in that concrete way and keeping in mind that just because it's online doesn't mean it's fake or less real, that the same laws and regulations that often apply offline, like your student campus rules, still apply even if it's online. So keeping that in mind. And then I think, Daly, if you want to go into more about harm reduction and kind of an individual approach to.
Sure. Yeah. The first thing that I would like highlight to people that are beginning to look into upping their own security and privacy is to just like overemphasize the idea that it is totally, these are attainable goals. Like upping your privacy and security game isn't that difficult, even though the technologies and the concepts that we use are often like too technical and difficult to think about and understand, and even just like say these technical concepts. There's a lot that can be done with just like some pretty basic concepts that you don't need to be like a tech whiz to do. I would visit EFF.org/SEC. That's the Security Education Companion, where we put together a bunch of different guides for how to put together different like lesson modules that are specific to your needs or the people that you're speaking with. There's also the Surveillance Self-Defense Guide that is EFF.org/SSD. And that is a bunch of like hands-on advice for how to do different things like encrypting your hard drive or implementing multi-factor authentication, just like different things you can do to up your privacy and security. Also, specific to students, we have a new issue page up on EFF.org that is specific to student privacy. So if you visit EFF.org/issues/student privacy, or just under the issues tab on our home site, you'll find that there. And there's a bunch more resources available for students and educators.
Or you just Google EFF student privacy, it'll probably bring you right there.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So it looks like you might be frozen there.
Yeah, well, I'll just say on our behalf, thanks again for inviting us. It's really been a pleasure. I know our executive director went to school in Iowa and was very excited to hear about us doing this. So again, feel free to reach out to us, press@EFF.org, organizing@EFF.org, and we're happy to help communities that are looking to fight to defend their digital rights.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all everyone for watching. Pleasure to be here.
Yep. Thanks for having us.
Bye.